Hello, grandfather. Hello. He can talk then, can he?
Of course he can talk. He's a human being, isn't he?
Well, if he's your grandfather, who knows?
The Beagles really are one of few bands that are so ubiquitous with music that they need no introduction whatsoever. Literally, what can possibly be said that hasn't been said before about the Beagles and their music? The Beagles have forever shaped and influenced the way music sounds, and their sound changed a lot over their careers, evolving and distinguishing itself with the times, inventing new genres, progressing the body that is music into what it is today. It's fantastic. So, I need to review the White Album. I need to make a recipe for it. But what can I possibly say about the White Album that hasn't been said in one of hundreds of video essays across the internet that already exist? Maybe I could say something like, "Welcome to Raven Foods, where recipes meet music. Today we're going to be making a huge feast based off of the Beagles' White Album. This music inspired all the food you'll see today, and this food was inspired by all the music you'll be listening to in this video. Enjoy." So this album really is very experimental. That's kind of what it's known for. It was really the first studio album, for being real. This was the album where the Beagles decided they would take studio music to the next level. Studio music was still kind of obscure, live music was really the thing, and then the Beagles went to make a studio album, not a live album, nothing in concert, and people went nuts for it. It was incredible. So what we're going to need to make is something incredible. It's a little bit outside the wheelhouse. It's rich, delicious, full of flavors, experimental, and it has to be delicious. So we're starting with beef. We're going to make a nice, delicious steak just from a roast key. So what I've started with is just the fluid that we're going to use to marinate again. So what's in there so far is a cup and a half of sherry, about a third of a cup of reserved liquid from just the garlic juice from minced garlic. Then we have another third of a cup of sesame oil in there. Then you just have some thyme, some paprika, and some celery salt to season it, as well as a splash of lemon juices in there as well. Then we're going to put in some black pepper and a half cup of teriyaki marinade. Then we're going to cut some guidelines in it. This will help it marinate better and also allow us to slice it very easily into scapes once it's cooked. Then we're just going to flip it into marinade, wrap it up in some paper towel, and put it in the refrigerator. Once it's been in the refrigerator for a couple hours, at least, you can. So we're just going to put some garlic powder in the bottom of the pan here. Just a lot of garlic powder, honestly, way too much. You'd think way too much, but it's just enough. And some salt, some rosemary, and some thyme. As well as some sesame seeds, some cardamom, and some turmeric. Then we're going to put in some minced onion, as well as some chicken stock. This is a very flavorful dry rub. It's going to be quite delicious. It's going to impart a ton of flavor into this beef. We're also going to use some cornstarch. This will impart a little bit of crispiness. Honestly, you can lose the cornstarch if you want to, but it makes also just disperses the flavor. The sugar is very good. It caramelizes and adds a lot, so make sure to add some sugar to your dry rub. Brown sugar actually would be much better than white sugar, but I use white sugar this time. Then, once all your stuff's in there, you want to stir it all together. Lay down some tin foil. Put some spread vegetable oil on it. Make the spices in the dry rub stick to it nicely. Then you're going to take your dry rub seasoning and just pour some of it onto the oily side. It will stick there very easily, of course. Spread that around and then put your beef right on top. And then wrap it up in the tin foil and it will be ready to go straight into your oven. This goes into the oven at 450 degrees for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to reduce the heat significantly and put it in for an additional 2 hours. For the 2 hours in question, you can just put it in at any temperature depending on how well done you want, is how I describe it. Use your best judgment, don't burn it to a fucking crisp. So I put it at the lowest temperature possible because I want it to be pretty raw in the middle. You can also just take it out earlier, of course, but this is really good for slowly baking up the juices, as well as at 10 minutes at the high heat to really, it's almost like searing it. Speaking of really nice things, this album is incredible. It is one of the Beatles' best, it's uncontestable. Not that the Beatles really have worst, except for Revolution 9. Come to think of it, the Beatles are one of those incredible bands where it's partially growing up with them. It's all in their melodies, it's all in their vocals, it's really everything. There's a level of genius to it. And I categorized the songs in this album into 4 major categories. Meaty, delicious, classic tasting or feeling songs. Then there's fancy, experimental feeling songs. There's also sweet, sort of lovey feeling songs. And then there's these sort of songs, but almost a fancy category. That's not just experimental, but also nice in a way that some of the experimental music maybe isn't, but the Beatles at whole are known to be. And I'll explain what I mean by that better throughout this video, but we don't have time right now. We gotta start cooking, so we're gonna boil a whole bunch of potatoes in halves, and then we're going to shock them with ice. Then we're going to pull out the centers, scoop out the centers, and try and keep the shells intact. I use tin foil to hold them intact, as you saw. And then we're going to mash these insides best we can. We're pretty much going to make mashed potatoes. Never had a twice baked potato. It falls into that fancy category I mentioned. It's a very classy looking dish that tastes great in my opinion. It's not experimental, it's not sweet, but it's real fancy and pretty in its presentation. It's almost the deviled eggs, if you will, of potatoes. So now we're going to take some sour cream and we're going to mash that into our mashed potatoes as well. But it's not just sour cream we're going to use. We're going to be using various cheeses, Parmesan, of course, a healthy amount, as well as some cream. Half and half, just table cream, and heavier cream would be even better, but black pepper, garlic powder, and some cheddar as well. We're going to put that all in there and we're going to mash it up even further. We want to get this to be a super fine mash because what we're going to use is a piping bag to insert this back into our potato skins. Then these enter the oven with the meat. And there you go, those are really our centerpieces. So the meat and the potatoes are really the meat and potatoes of this meal, you could certainly say. And this gives us a perfect opportunity to actually discuss the album, which is one of the Beatles' greatest works. So I'm really much more familiar with the Beatles' later albums, not necessarily their later music. I know tons of Beatles music from all eras, but I'm a fan and I just happen to own and know their old music or their later music very, very well. So the White Album is one of those albums for me it's their first studio album that's all in studio. It was so experimental in so many ways, it really goes to a lot of crazy places. So that last dish, that potato dish, I consider that a fancy dish, and there's a lot of fancy music on this album. Now we're going to move on to something more experimental.
Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.
Number 9 is the worst song. So not that experimental, but experimental for sure. The Beatles treaded a ton of new ground with this album. and we're going to tread some new ground with this next recipe, celery root puree, which will really enhance this game. So for this puree, all you need is 2 celery roots. You're going to peel them, chop them up, and then put them in a pot and just cover them in milk. So pour milk in until they just barely start to float a little bit. Then once you've got enough milk in there, you're going to just let it boil in the milk until it all becomes fork tender. In the meantime, we're going to put a few pieces, about 5-6 pieces of white chocolate into the blender here. Then we're going to check, make sure that they've become fork tender. They haven't. But once they have, you can just take these, pour them all into the blender. Don't include too much of the milk. We want this to be a puree, not a soup. So I only included enough soup to maybe half, or puree milk to half fill the blender. Then I add a bit of lime. And there you go, that's all you really need for celery root puree. It's pretty easy. You can add other flavors if you want. You can exclude the chocolate if you want, but I found it added nice, just extra sweetness to it. The cream makes it very nice. It's all very good, and it's very light, sweet, kind of celery-ish flavor. If you've never had it, you should try just tasting celery root on its own. It's a more light flavor than celery. It just has a bit of a nice rooty sweetness to it that you don't quite get from celery. Anyways, that's more of an experimental thing I did this time that I thought went very well. Kind of a Buffalo Bill, if you will, which is an experimental song on this album.
Hey, Buffalo Bill, what did you kill? Buffalo Bill.
I think it's very good.
If to kill was not a sin.
Back when he looked so fierce.
There's also experimental songs like Glass Onion.
Into a glass onion. I told you about the war is a mean man.
Piggies.
All together now. Everywhere there's lots of trees living dreamy lives. You can see them out for dinner with the green wives, punching forks and knives to eat their prairie guys.
Revolution 9, which I mentioned before, I don't like.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
That much at all. Savory truffle,
Green tangerine, Montelimon.
which I like a lot.
You have to have them all, but all the time stop on a truffle.
And Helter Skelter.
To the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. When I stop and I turn and I go for a ride. Till I get to the bottom, I see you again.
Which a lot of people might not know is considered one of the earliest proto-metal songs.
Do you, don't you want me to love you?
This is a precursor to heavy metal and metal in general as we know it today, which is very cool. There's also a lot of meteor songs, so I describe this as like classic, sort of heavy. These songs feel like dense and in a different way. You'll see what I mean. Songs like Back in the USSR.
Man, I had a dreadful flight. I'm back in the USSR. You don't know how lucky you are.
Which is the opening track. Happiness is a Warm Gun.
And acquainted with the touch of a velvet hand, like a lizard on a window pane.
Your Blues has incredible instrumentals and vocals.
I'm lonely. Wanna die.
I really like that one. It's a standout for me.
If I ain't dead already. Girl, you know the reason why.
And finally, While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
While my guitar gently weeps.
There's also fancier songs like Don't Pass Me By,
Don't make me cry, don't make me blue.
Julia, which is a love song, but I think it sounds fancy.
So I sing a song of love for Julia.
Wild Honey Pie sounds fancy, not a favorite of mine, but fancy for sure. I'm So Tired, a little mellow, but fancy, absolutely.
I haven't slept a wink.
And Blackbird, again, very mellow, sad.
Blackbird fly, blackbird fly.
But it's a fancy song. It sounds really nice.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night.
It's got fancy all over it. And then there's also sweet songs, which what I'm making next. These sugar glazed carrots. These will be very sweet to represent these sweet songs. So I've got here Honey Pie.
Honey pie, you are making me crazy. I'm in love, but I'm lazy.
Which is one of my favorites again. I really like the old start up, how it sounds like an old radio and then kicks into a song.
Oh, she's hit the big time. In the USA.
That's fantastic. I like Cry Baby Cry. It's super sweet.
Cry, baby, cry. Making mother sigh.
Dear Prudence, again, sweet.
Dear Prudence.
And then Obladi Oblada, which is one of my favorite songs on this album. Helter Skelter is probably my favorite, but Obladi Oblada is of course up there, and it's incredibly sweet. It's a very pretty, beautiful song. Of course, none of these songs can hold a candle to the Beatles' 1969 version of Apple Bottom Jeans.
Apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur. The whole club, they were looking at her. Baggy sweatpants, Reebok with strap. Turn around and give that booty a smack.
But that's besides the point. And we've got to get back to cooking these carrots. Sugar glazed carrots are exactly what they sound like. They're a very fast, very easy dish. Just get a pan, get some carrots, sliced up and in there. I use garlic powder and pepper as well as some salt as my seasoning. Then you just pour in some water and a lot of sugar. And stir them in there, and you pretty much let it boil up. This is a little out of order, so you'll see here I'm just holding up the sugar, and then the water's not even in there. This is just before I put it in. And now you'll see pretty much the finished product in a second. There you go. So these were extremely sweet, extremely delicious. These were actually what most people who ate this meal said was the best part. They actually all very much praised this as being extremely tasty, and I couldn't agree more. This was my favorite way to make carrots. I've been making carrots like this ever since I recorded this. I've been doing this a bit more often because it's very, very tasty, and I definitely recommend you try it. Just like I definitely recommend you listen to this album if for whatever reason you never have and you're watching this video like some lunatic. You definitely listen to this album and make all this food and listen to this album, maybe pair them. But now we gotta make our gravy. That's the last step. That's the last thing to finish off this dish. This delicious meal. So this is easy step, so let's get to it. This is not gonna be quick because it's a long video already. We're just going to pour some instant gravy powder into about 2 cups of milk. Then we're going to pour off the drippings here from our beef, which has been cooking this entire time. So what I actually used was not milk, but cream. Regardless isn't a word. That's how you make the gravy. It's super simple. Just cream, gravy powder, and a little bit of drippings. Yum yum. Mushrooms are optional, but I threw them a bunch because I like them, as well as some black pepper. And there you go. That's a delicious meal. We've got potatoes, roast, carrots, gravy, and celeriac puree all together. This was incredible, and I definitely recommend it. It was a full meal for one full album. And yeah, that's really all there is to say about that. Looks delicious, tastes delicious.